Production funding for Another View comes from the Hampton Citizens Unity Commission, using the time, talents, and skills of a broad base of citizen volunteers to help break down racial and cultural barriers, working to achieve the City of Hampton's community plan for a healthy, diverse community. And from the African American Programming Advisory Group, community visionaries assisting WHRO to engage, enlighten, educate, and entertain all communities in Hampton Roads. And now, Another View.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamley, and welcome to Another View. This program is designed and supported by members of the African American community, but it is relevant to all of us who live here in Hampton Roads. Each week, we'll bring you intelligent discussion about community issues, news you can use to make everyday living a little bit easier, and stories guaranteed to be uplifting and inspiring. Tonight, we're talking about media coverage of the African American community. Now, according to the latest ODU's State of the Region report on television news, blacks were approximately twice as likely to be mentioned in a crime news story than in any other type of story combined. The question is, why? Joining us to discuss the issue are two veteran television broadcasters. Barbara Ciara is anchor and managing editor of News Channel 3 and also the president of the National Association of Black Journalists. And Alveta Ewell is anchor for Wavy TV 10. Unfortunately, Regina Mobley from 13 News could not join us because of a death in her family. We have her and her family in our thoughts and prayers. Welcome to the program, ladies, our inaugural program. I really appreciate you being here today. Yeah. You both have been in the business for 20 plus years, as have I, and all the time we hear complaints, particularly from the black community, that we only cover crime stories, that we only portray, and I speak when I say we, meaning media, we only portray blacks in a negative light. True or false? I'll start with you, Barb.
Well, okay. I think that, we have to embrace the idea that perception is reality. So for those folks at home who watch news programming and they see the repetitive nature of the crime stories and that there might be an African American face attached to it, yes, at some point you're going to begin to think that the focus is on news that's negative relating to communities of color. But I do think that those of us who have been in the business for a long time wave the flag all the time during our editorial meetings to be cautious of that. For example, I think all of the television stations, and Alveta can speak for hers, we make a concerted effort to remove color from descriptions of criminals so that there is no attachment to the criminal act and color. So unless they have a very vivid description, I'm talking about scars, clothing color, features that are descriptive, tattoos, we try to steer away from the whole color aspect. But is that perception reality? Yes.
Alveta, do you think that
perception really is reality? And that's been a huge point, that when we go into our meetings, we talk about that sort of thing. And Barbara's correct. One of the things that is important is to keep from bringing those stereotypes, not just into the newsroom, but out into the community. We do work to, we don't say an Asian male, so you don't say an African American male. You don't say a Caucasian male or a female. So there's no reason for, we give a description that will actually help the public to be able to find whoever, whoever did perform the crime, if that's the case. The very sad reality is that we do find ourselves in a lot of the African American communities at night, especially summer nights. Where there could be, I guess, a perception of an uprising of crime, a shooting, a stabbing.
Well, but a lot of people ask, and they say, well, why do you cover bad news? Why don't you cover good news? And as a former news director, I used to always say, what is the definition of news? First of all, I mean, is there such a thing as good news?
I think there is. I think that there are positive images, and we'd be in denial if we didn't say that there needs to be a balance. And so I think we need to strive just as hard to tell stories of historic value, like the Norfolk 17 recently. It's been in the news cycle as that 50th anniversary arrives. And we need to be mindful that, you know, we need to diversify our experts. Like if we need to talk to a lawyer, or we need to talk to a doctor, or we need to talk to a scientist, we need to work to diversify that pool of experts so that you see more African Americans in those roles, so that it doesn't become one slate. Okay, if we're talking about crime, we're obviously talking about color, but if we're talking about economics, we're talking about the white community. So I think that there needs to be a purposeful decision-making process that happens during that editorial cycle, so that the persons in charge, the leadership in the newsrooms, are mindful that when those images flow out, it has to begin with the framing of the newscast in the beginning of the day.
That's exactly what the ODU report called it. They said that the producers, they blame the producers, that the producers frame the stories, and that all of they went from September 10th through 27th, and they looked at 2,111 stories altogether. And out of those stories, about 24% were crime stories that led the newscast. And out of that 24%, 66% were of black people, either black on black crime or a black person committing a crime against another white person, etc. And so their whole point was, if the producers stopped framing the news that way. But if that's where the crime is happening, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
In all honesty, if you know, we don't go looking for the story. We don't create the news. The news is created for us, and we do hear that a lot too. We do go to the communities. We go to all the communities and look for positive role models and positive images, and we find them. They're there, and we put them on the air. They may not be done as much as the crime stories, but we let people, you know, it's important for people to understand, in a lot of the crime-ridden communities, there are good people, and we bring that to you.
Do you think that people perceive news as what am I trying to say here? That if they're watching the newscast, that they have to start with a crime story, as opposed to an economic story, or as opposed to, you know, some other type of story? Does that have to lead the newscast?
It absolutely doesn't have to lead the newscast. And, you know, there was an expression that attached itself to television news when you were in news many years ago during the 70s, where, you know, the joke became almost a parody of news: if it bleeds, it leads. And quite frankly, it is too easy to follow the fire. It's too easy to follow the crime. And if you are going to follow the crime, then you need to dig beneath the layer of why that's happening. And I think that, you know, those of us who have been in the game a long time, we don't want to just see the sheet covering the latest teenager to lose his life. We want to find out who that person is. And we want to find out why that life was cut short. So I think that we're all trying to dig beneath the layer now, and you're out there the next morning and you are talking to family and friends and trying to find out inherently what is going on in that community that is causing this crime to erupt on a repetitive basis, because there are some communities where we find ourselves there over and over and over again. But at the same time, I do think that we need to work harder to cover all kinds of crime, because there's white-collar crime that is committed by white people, and we don't spend as much time developing those
actually,
stories.
in the study, they said that the newspaper tends to spend more time on those types of stories. But let me throw this to you. We're a visual medium, and so doing the white-collar crime may be a little bit more difficult to do on a television newscast. Do you agree?
It's a lot more difficult, because a lot of times it's so hidden, and it doesn't. How do I explain? It doesn't have this. I don't want to say sensation, because that's not really what we're going for, but it doesn't.
Doesn't typically have a crime scene attached to it.
Yeah, it's not visual. It's not extremely visual, if you will. But I do think that news is changing, as Barbara was saying before. The focus on what we do is changing. And I think if people take another look and go back and see, because I think a lot of people are looking at, and I understand statistics have a lot to do with it, but a lot of people in the public lots of times will assume that we are the same that we were 20 years ago. and we're not.
And they haven't had a chance to look at you and to see.
They have the chance. I'm not sure that they actually do. I'm not sure that they actually do, and I'll probably get yelled at for that. But I mean, you know,
I won't yell at you. I agree.
We don't do news the same way that we used to.
Alveta, let me ask you though. Now you're a native of Hampton Roads, which
Yes.
is very, very different. First of all, in the business, because all of us are nomads, and we all travel around. So the fact that you were born and raised here, what have you seen? What change have you seen in terms of coverage in general, but particularly of the African American community?
We have begun to do a lot more positive stories in the African American community. I remember when I first started in the business, and you know, I'll tell everybody, Barbara actually helped me to get into the television industry. Okay, I was doing radio and loving what I was doing, and Barbara said, "You really need to be."
She's better on television.
And absolutely, I appreciate the fact that you helped me with that, because I love it. And one of the reasons I love it is because we actually can create stories in people's minds. We actually I get a chance to generate, help to generate what's going on. And it has changed since I started in the business. Now, goodness, I started in '77. So
coming up on your 20th anniversary?
At Wavy.
At Wavy.
My 20th anniversary at Wavy. My goodness, that's right, exactly.
And she looks 20.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, okay. It's called makeup. But you know, it's changed a lot. And when I first got in it, it was, you know, slime and crime. It really was. It started out that way, and that was the one thing that you did. You went to the crime scene. Now we do look behind the scenes and try to say, okay, who was this person that was killed? A lot of them were standout. You know, even the crime has changed. It's not always being in the wrong place at the wrong time or being a bad kid. It's just not like that anymore.
So you think it's really important for the newscast then to put things in context and in perspective?
Absolutely.
Barbara, let me ask you from a national perspective, as the president of NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists, and we could get into a whole discussion over why there has to be an NABJ, but we won't today. We'll do that at another time.
All right.
But,
rain check on
But
you.
exactly. But with the new president, with President Obama in office, and now all of a sudden there seems to be a new image that is coming forth of the black family, of black children, of, you know, somebody asked the question a while ago, whose image will prevail, Barack Obama's or 50 Cent? You know, do you think that with having a black president in office that media coverage will change, that the perceptions will change any?
I am ever hopeful, but I think that, you know, the cynic in me tells me that growth is slow. And while we have a new leadership that embodies you have made it here in America to the African American community, I think that on the level where we sit, that there's still going to be a lot of work to do before, you know, we can convey those changes so that there is a more productive African American middle class. Because let's face it, there's still about, you know, 40 to 50% of the African Americans who are in this country are still below the poverty line.
Exactly.
So when you're talking about that and you're talking about imagery, I don't want people to walk away from the inauguration of Barack Obama and suddenly feel that, you know, we can have a kumbaya moment, everybody's made it, and there's no more work to do. There's still a lot of work to be done in order to get parity in this country.
I want to ask this of both of you, because people ask me all the time, if you see something on the air that you don't like, what do you need to do? Does my phone call really make a difference?
Yes, absolutely. Your phone call makes all the difference in the world. When people call us and let us know what they think, that's the pulse of the community right there. You've got to let us know. That's really one of the few ways that we do know. We're kind of in a box, and we're at a think tank, and we're constantly thinking about what we need to do for the rest of the day. But sometimes it's hard to hit the pulse of the community if the community doesn't come to us and let us know.
Okay, so
same with us. We absolutely we sort of parlay that your power of one equals the power of more like 10 or 20. So for every phone call or for every email, we're thinking there might be 10 to 20 people out there who are thinking along the same lines. So it really does count, especially if it's a thoughtful critique of what has happened. You know, the one thing that might get thrown away is if somebody just calls in and they don't like your hair, well, you know, whatever. That's very subjective. But if you have some thoughtful comment on the content of the broadcast or the way a story was framed, we're very interested in that.
we only have a couple minutes left, but you were talking a little while ago about management and about how the decision-making process happens. And as a former news director, I know how critical that is, but because if you don't have enough people behind the scenes making those decisions, then the types of stories that need to get out there have a hard time getting out there. Is it getting any better in the newsroom today?
Well, I have to say that you have to teach, and I know that you do the same thing. You have to teach the young people in your newsroom. You have to tell them exactly how to frame their broadcast. And I've told this story to Barbara, but I'll tell it again. A young producer on staff who wrote a story. It was a crime story. And she said, Norfolk police are looking for a black man, 6'2", 180 pounds. And she put that in my copy.
My husband.
And she said, so
it's half of America.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so she said, well, what's wrong with that? When I said, you have to rewrite that. I said, Norfolk police looking for a black man, 6'2", 180 pounds. So am I. I said, so, you know, you really have to be more specific. So you have to do those teaching lessons every time to help reframe the way people think in our newsrooms.
And it doesn't always go over well, even with the producers. It doesn't always go over well, you know. And a lot of times, even our news director will make a mandate. We're not going to do this anymore, or we're, you know, and change is hard. Change is hard for us. Change is hard for the public. Mm-hmm. It's going to take a while for the perception to change.
Well, I think we started changing that perception this evening, and I really appreciate you all being here, being a part of the first show, and we will be continuing this conversation as we go along. So thank you so much for joining us. That's Barbara Ciara, the managing editor and anchor at News Channel 3 and president of the National Association of Black Journalists, and Alveta Ewell, who is an anchor with Wavy TV 10. And when we come back, we're going to have some news you can use about your health and your wealth. But right now, let's take a look at some things happening around the community. Welcome back. In tonight's lifestyle segment, we focus on the health of your body and the health of your pocketbook. Lisa Godley introduces us to Dr. Khadijah Jordan, who talks about a new twist to an old surgery. And money mentor Eric Labaad has information about taxes if you own your own business. Hi, Lisa.
Barbara, today I'm here with another Views expert on women's health issues, Dr. Khadijah Jordan, and welcome.
Thank you.
Today we're going to discuss an age-old procedure, the hysterectomy. And there are a lot of new options out there now that would entail you not necessarily having everything taken out. Dr. Jordan, let's start with explaining exactly what a hysterectomy is.
Well, a hysterectomy is actually removal of the uterus. And the uterus, as you know, is the womb. That's the area that we house our children when we're growing them inside our bodies. And some feel that after you finish your childbearing years, you don't need it. But it can have complications, or it can cause pain. It can cause irregular bleeding. So that's the reason why a lot of people come to the doctor complaining of those symptoms, and they may have ended up with a hysterectomy in the past. About 600,000 people had hysterectomies in the year between 2003 and 2004. And we found that 90% of the hysterectomies are for benign reasons. So actually only 10% were for cancer.
In years past, when women suffered from heavy bleeding, doctors would tell them that the hysterectomy was the only thing they could do, but that's not necessarily the case.
This procedure, called endometrial ablation, the cryoablation technique, takes a small 5mm probe, insert it through the cervix into the uterus. And so this is the main probe, and then this is the disposable probe that fits over this for sterility. This tip becomes very cold, sub-zero temperatures, and it freezes the lining. Once this lining is frozen, usually 2 freezes of 6 minutes each, then this lining is destroyed and there are no more periods. And it's usually successful in 80 to 90% of the population.
I'm here with Eric Labaad, owner of the Labaad Consulting Group, and he is a personal finance consultant. Yes. And welcome. He is going to be the money mentor for Another View. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Well, the question today, and I know in a lot of people's minds, they're starting small businesses. They want to know, what do I need to know? Yes. It's getting close to tax time. What should I know about taxes in my small business?
Well, I think one of the primary ideas is to have the proper documentation. Many times individuals will go to their accountant or their CPA with a box of receipts. And the tax preparers, the CPAs, they don't have time to go through the receipts and literally put them in different folders where those deductions go. I call the Schedule C a financial weapon because of what it allows the business owner to utilize. Reference document I use, it's called 422 Tax Deductions for Businesses and Self-Employed Individuals. Only business owners can use those. And so what we want to make sure and that they understand what's available to them. Once you have the knowledge, you can apply what you learn to better your bottom line. And that's what we ultimately want to do.
Monday marked the 50th anniversary of the end of massive resistance in Norfolk. I attended a luncheon on that day where the city of Norfolk and the Commonwealth of Virginia paid tribute to the 17 African Americans who integrated Norfolk Public Schools. Governor Tim Kaine was the keynote speaker, and during his speech, he apologized on behalf of the Commonwealth to the students and the Black community for the negative treatment they had to endure. But then he thanked them for their courageous actions helped turn this Commonwealth around for the better. Lisa Godley spent time with the Norfolk 17, and here are some of their thoughts.
Here in the WHRO studios, 10 of the 17 students sat down as a group for the first time in 50 years to discuss their experiences as the first Black students to walk the halls, attend classes, and endure things many of us can't even imagine. Experiences that would earn them a very important place in American history.
The very first day of school, getting out of that car and walking up the sidewalk to Norview Senior High School. I can just envision it in my head right now. All these tall white policemen with high boots on, and I think the uniforms were black, but they had guns and looked like they were long, big guns, one little short pistol gun. And I'm thinking they're going to protect me. I don't have to worry about nothing because policemen, they're my friends. Well, they were throwing things at us, paper, balls, and little sticks and whatever. And the policemen, they just stand there looking as if to say, you better not throw nothing back at them. And that hurt. That really hurt.
When I entered school on the first day and went through the doors of Norview High School, they parted the ways in the hallway. And all of the students stood to the side. And you walked like you were clearing the waters.
When I stepped into the cafeteria from the fear of all the white people, and I saw these Black people serving the food. Mm-hmm. And the first day, the lady said to me, and she says, "Good morning, Andrew Heidelberg." And she said, this was a Black lady. And she said it so loud and distinct and clear, as if she was not afraid of white people. You know what I'm saying? And I remember how calming that was to me. It was like, I mean, my eyes, you know, it was just, my eyes water now when I think about that, because after going through that day, it just made me feel so good to hear a Black person speak up like that. I mean, and it made me feel like I was really somebody that day.
For the students who now benefit from their sacrifices, the pioneers leave these words of wisdom.
The only way you can make a positive mark is becoming an educated person.
I would say just hang in there. School is important for every child, and I believe that education is the key.
What I always told my students and our own children, once you get it in your head, there's nobody that can take it away from you.
By the way, that was a partial clip from the documentary Norfolk 17, Their Story. If you missed the original airing, you can see it this Sunday at 4 p.m. right here on WHRO TV 15, Digital 15.1. We'd love to hear from you about Another View. Send us your ideas or just what you think about the program. Visit our website at www.anotherview.tv or email us at anotherview@whro.org or write us at 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk 23508. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, what do you say to a young man who doesn't believe he'll live to be 21? We'll see you next time for Another View. Good night.
Production funding for Another View comes from Hampton's 400th Anniversary Committee and the Hampton Neighborhood Commission, partnering with neighborhoods throughout the city, working hand in hand to create vibrant places we are proud to call home and celebrate. And from the African American Programming Advisory Group, community visionaries assisting WHRO to engage, enlighten, educate, and entertain all communities in Hampton Roads.